All right, everybody, welcome to our final Talk Tuesday of the summer. My name is William Brito. I'm the Student Affairs Advisor for Education, Gender, and Sexuality at the Multicultural Center at Georgia State University. So this is the end of a wonderful series that we started this summer and which we will also continue into the fall. And so our topic today is art as activism. So today we're going to be talking about how art relates to advocacy, how it relates to social justice. And we have an awesome panel lined up for you. And so without further ado, I think we're waiting on one more. However, we're going to respect everyone's time and we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to start with introductions. And I'm going to go panelist by who I see at the bottom of my screen first. So I will let you know when it is your turn. So we're going to do introduction. Just tell us a little bit about who you are and tell us about what form of art speaks to you. And how do you tell your story through it? So what form of art speaks to you, and how do you tell your story through it? All right, and so we are going to start with Bree.
Hey, you guys. My name is Bree Adams. I actually graduated from Georgia State University in 2016. Was a studio art major. After graduation, I went into teaching. So I'm a former middle school social studies teacher, and now I'm a working full-time artist. I work at a ceramic studio. I paint and I teach private art lessons. I would say all art really kind of speaks to me. I think any sort of expression and creativity is definitely something I've always been interested in. I always love to see and hear and learn about. Um, my forte is definitely in visual arts, and so I mostly use painting, acrylic, and oil to tell my story and tell the story of my people.
Thank you, Bree. Thank you for sharing that. Next on our panel list, we have the wonderful Jaquela Sharpley, who is a recent GSU alumni. Jaquela, take it away.
There we go. Good afternoon, everyone. Like Will said, my name is Jaquela Sharpley, and I just graduated May of this year. For me, photography and videography is the art that really speaks to me and is the medium that I choose to express myself and, like Bria said, the struggles and to depict my people and the people around me. Um, I've always been really big on still photography. It's just something about what it allows you to interpret in the moment. So videography more so tells the story versus still photography allows you to create the story and create the narrative yourself. And so I just really enjoy photography and I enjoy videography as well.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you, Jaquela. Next, for our panelists, we have Dr. Lakita Bonnet Bailey, who's an associate professor of political science at Georgia State University. Thank you for being with us today, Dr. Bonnet Bailey. Take it away.
Thank you. Yes, I'm currently in the Department of African American Studies, but my field is political science. So, yes, I'm not an artist, I'm an academic. But as far as my research, my research is on art. So, I research hip hop music, particularly looking at rap music and the way that it influences and impacts Black attitudes and political behavior. And I can tell my story through hip hop. Definitely my story. Hip hop is my story. Hip hop is my life. I listen to hip hop. Um, I utilize it in my research to talk about political and societal issues that are going on. So currently, I have a book coming out on social justice and hip hop. So how hip hop has been used in the fight against social justice, and I'm working on a book on hip hop and racial attitudes, as well as a book on hip hop and Black Lives Matter movement. So I'm looking at the various ways in which art can be used as a form of activism in those arenas.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you, Dr. Bonnet Bailey, and thank you for that correction. I apologize. I'm associate professor in the African American Studies Department. Next, we have Mr. Oliver Colbert.
You guys can hear me? Awesome. Yeah, my name is Oliver Colbert. I am currently a admissions counselor at the University of North Carolina Law School. Outside of that, I am a writer and a poet, spoken word artist. I would say the medium that speaks to me the most when it comes down to art, every like facet of art kind of like speaks to me. I'm not even gonna lie. Like if I look at it and it's a form of like creative expression, it kind of resonates with me in somehow, some way. I would say hip hop, the written language, and literature are like the top three for me. But even like with dance and choreography, like I can't dance for nothing, but like a dope dance choreography, a dope dance routine, like I be seeing like Beyonce's videos and stuff like that. Those things are like super like, I don't know, just like they speak to me, they vibrate loud with my energy. So yeah, but if I had to choose one, it's spoken word poetry. I like to play with language and use it in a way to tell my message. And I've heard my story told in a lot of different ways in different hip hop songs. So yeah, so I'll go with poetry and hip hop.
Awesome. Thank you, Oliver. And last but definitely not least, we have Miss Felicia Dove, who is the founder and CEO of Black Monarchy. Felicia just joined us. So Felicia, if you were not able to hear that first question, so we're just doing introductions. Tell us about who you are and what form of art speaks to you, and how do you tell your story through that form of art?
You all hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
You can hear? Okay, excellent. Sorry, this is my first time using WebEx. Hello, everyone. My name is Felicia Dove. I am the owner and entrepreneur for Black Monarchy. We're located in Buffalo, New York. We're a global artisan and fashion boutique. We specialize in African jewelry, custom clothing, and really teaching people that Black is the monarchy. So for me, I look at my role in artivism through fashion. That's the medium in which I choose to really speak about the issues that conflict and really trouble our neighborhoods, our communities, inner city impoverished peoples and persons. I feel like it's a part of our genetic makeup. Even in the midst of any struggle, we in some way make things beautiful. We use art to really express those things, and we dance in the midst of storms. So that's pretty much the work that I like to push. I think fashion has always been on the forefront of all things activism. When we're not able to speak, we dress and we express ourselves in that way. So Black Monarchy really is teaching people how to do that in their own way.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us today, Felicia. I'm just really excited about this conversation, you all. I think when we think about activism, when we think about art, art has been there for decades, for centuries that, help us through certain movements. So we move into our next question, and I'm gonna bounce it back to Bree, excuse me. What activist endeavors have you participated in? And you can be as specific as you need to be. But yes, the question is, what activist endeavors have you participated in? We're starting with Bree.
So I think for me, activism has a lot of different lanes and has a lot of different places and roles. I know personally, I feel obligated to be a little bit more physically active. So I do go to the protests. I do, go out. I like to show my face. I like to talk to people in the community. But I think the main way that I move in activism is just through trying to engage the people around me and spread knowledge and information and awareness. I think a lot of times, a lot of problems stem from ignorance and just not knowing. So I try to do my part in what I do best, or what I think I do best, and just create and hope that something that I can create can spark somebody to do some more research, can spark somebody to look up look up some stories, read about other people, learn about why people are in these movements. So I think my activism is definitely most centered in kind of being out there and just relaying information in the way that's easiest for me, which is through painting.
Thank you. Jaquan, what activist endeavors have you participated in?
Similar to Bria, I'm very much so a forefront type of person. I've just kind of always been that way. I feel like, first of all, I absolutely am excited and respect the fact that she did say that activism has many different lanes. I've seen throughout the past, I guess, 2 months now, online, that people thought that if you weren't on the front line, if you weren't protesting every day, if you weren't like out in the streets, then you wasn't doing enough, or your efforts were going unnoticed, or you didn't, like a number of different things that were being said for people who just simply, that may not be their thing, and that's okay. For me, that is my thing. One of the greatest people ever, period, to me is John Lewis. And so for me to see that for 80 years, well, I guess not technically 80 years, we'll just say like 65, 70 years, he was active on his feet regardless of the situation. I kind of feel like it's our responsibility as millennials, or whatever the next generation is, to pick up where they left off. They're older now, they can't be in the streets like that, they can't riot, they can't protest, they can't walk these same steps. So I personally feel like it's our responsibility now to pick up where they left off. So for me, continuing to go to marches. I've been to a number of marches for a number of different causes: women's rights, LGBTQIQA rights, civil and human rights. I've been to rallies, I've been to informationals, I went to at least 20 plus African American museums, obtaining different knowledge and making sure that I'm knowledgeable. So when I'm going to these places, when I'm speaking to people, doing my independent research, I'm able to do so in a way that's assertive, and I know what I'm talking about. So that's what's important to me, is being on the ground. While I completely 100% respect the fact that that is not for everyone, and I appreciate anyone who's doing their part in any role that they're in.
Awesome, awesome. Before we get to Dr. Bonnet Bailey, participants who are watching and attending this wonderful discussion, if you have any comments about the content that we're discussing, if you have any questions for the panelists, please feel free to put it in the chat box. It should be on your right-hand side, that toolbox right there. If you have questions, comments, or anything about what we're discussing, please don't hesitate to put it in the chat box. All right, Dr. Bonnet Bailey, what activist endeavors have you participated in?
Oh, I have participated in a lot. I've been to protests, I've participated in rallies. Of course, I haven't participated in any this round because of COVID. I've been quarantining. So I've been doing my social media activism, where it's just informing people, letting individuals who do want to participate on the front line know where rallies are occurring. And even in silent protests. I recently I'm a Delta, so I recently stood with Keisha Lance Bottoms with the virtual protests that we had, where we had to wear a mask in support of her and post our pictures online. So I'll participate in ways like that. And of course, I participate through my research. I participate in my classes. I try to inform individuals of things they don't know, to let them know the history of protests, to let them know the various ways in which you can participate in politics. Yeah, so I participate in all ways I can, even trying to help young students. So mentoring is a way that I can participate to tell them about different options that they have. I also participate by putting on programs, starting organizations. So last year I had a program at Georgia State called Black Popular Culture and Social Justice. And that was very great the first time we did that. I've done a number of conferences similar to that. And when I was younger, of course, I did things like start organizations and run the campus. I was all over the campus. I was a little rebel back in the day when I was in college. So I participated in a number of ways of activism.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Bonnet Bailey. All right, Oliver.
Most recently, I wasn't quarantining like I was supposed to quarantine. Although I'm in North Carolina, I flew to New York in June to be a part of the protests and the rallies that were going on in my community, because I come from Flatbush, Brooklyn. And so when I seen videos of cars burning in the streets and people getting snatched up by police and a lot of riots and stuff like that, literally blocks away from my house, I felt like I have to be a part of this. This is really where I grew up. This is my neighborhood. And if this change is going to happen there, I want to be a part of it. And not only that, I found that to be important to supplement the my protesting with also like how am I taking care of my community. So I stopped by a few people who I knew in the neighborhood who were elderly, you know, and checked on them, see if they needed groceries or whatever like that. And some of them really did. So I found that to be a form of activism. What I try not to do is like, I try not to get like, I think with activism, especially nowadays in this day of social media, like activism can become like this egotistical thing, right? Where it's just like, I feel like I got to do it because I want to be seen as this, you know? And so like separating myself from that and putting the cause in front of everything, right? Like this not necessarily something that I might see the benefits of, right? Like how did like Honorable John Lewis, like he might not see the benefits of what he was fighting for. You feel me? And what he was still fighting for. But our great grandkids might see the benefits and let that be the cause and the reason why you go out there and do that. From my position, my professional position, a few weeks ago, I held a session called Applying to Law School While Black. So we had prospective Black law students attend this virtual session where we went over some of the systemic racial barriers that Black students face specifically when applying to law school, and how that's inherent and that ripples throughout the whole legal system, all the way to the courtrooms and to the prison industrial system. So those are two things that I could just note at the top of my head.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. And last but definitely not least, Ms. Felicia Dove.
There you go. Okay, so first, a few shout outs to my soror. Shout out to my soror and also Oliver. I'm also from Brooklyn, born and raised in Crown Heights. So I mirror a lot of those same feelings that you have growing up, especially growing up in the inner city, in the hood, quote unquote. But actually, right now, I'm doing something really incredible and really exciting. I'm not sure if you all have heard about the story with Carrie Horn. She was the fired police officer here in Buffalo, New York, about 14 years ago, and she's been fighting for her pension for about 12 years. So long story short, she stopped the chokehold of an unarmed Black male and got one of her colleagues to take him out of a chokehold, which obviously could have killed him. And so now we look at the culture and the climate of what's happening in America. We're thinking around back then, now, to basically stop and intervene in police brutality. George Floyd would be here, Eric Garner will be here, Alton Sterling will be here. And so I've had the immense pleasure of being a third of her leading media team here in Buffalo, and we've been able to garner national coverage surrounding her story. She was stripped of her pension. She was stripped of any ability to sustain herself throughout this time. So for us, we are writing Carriel's Law, which basically is a six-part, www.carrioslaw.com for anyone who's watching, but it's a six-part law that basically states, one, from police having to intervene in the midst of any type of imminent danger that an officer can be giving to an unarmed person, especially if they're in handcuffs. And this goes beyond just police officers, but also into correctional officers. We're also getting a registry. So any officers that violate Carriel's Law by not intervening or actually are at the hands of those that are delivering the abuse, they'll be placed on a registry, which means they are not able to go from department to department, and there will be charges for those officers that do not intervene and for those who actually deliver the abuse. So, and then lastly, this whistleblower protection. So for those who want to protect, want to intervene, they won't be retaliated against the way Carriel Horn was. So I do a lot of things, but I think for me, this is probably the most important work that I've ever been a part of. You can follow us on all things Carriel's Law, Instagram and Facebook. And as a police brutality survivor, my case was back in 2011. I was fortunate enough to be a survivor to speak about it. Carriel's situation and Carriel's Law is very, very near and dear to my heart. So that's the form of activism I've been doing. We have done protests, concert protests. We've done violin memoriams for Elijah McClain, rest his soul. So we're doing a lot of those type of activism works. I love that you all said that it's not one way to do it. There are multifaceted ways to get your voice out. Some people will be on the front lines and some people will be behind desk. And so I've been lucky enough to kind of be on both ends of the spectrum. And I think it's important for us to keep our voices amplified for as long as possible.
Thank you, Felicia. So, all right, panelists. Oh, also, Felicia, if you want to put any of those website addresses, Instagrams, all of those things. You can put it in the chat box for our participants so they can tangibly see it. So my next question is, how has art generated social and political change, specifically in what ways? And you can talk about from your particular avenue, whether that's spoken word, photography, fashion, or you can speak in general, like in what ways have you seen art generate social and political change? And we'll start with Bree.
I think that they say art imitates life. So I think a lot of times, people are creating from what they're living, what they're experiencing, what they see. I feel like the reason why art has the ability to garner so much change is because a lot of times people simply aren't seeing what other people are. They're not a part of those experiences. They may not be from those places. They don't understand some of the things that's going on. I know for me personally, growing up, I was in a very sheltered, very white, very closed-minded place, and I had no idea about the state of Black people in America until I got to Georgia State University, honestly. And I mean, the way my eyes were open simply because I'm able to see and able to interact with other people who are creating, who are doing things that, I really didn't understand before, because I wasn't watching the movies, because I wasn't seeing the art and going to the places, because I wasn't reading the books, I wasn't reading the stories, I wasn't reading the poems. So I think art just really has a way of transcending, a lot of different places. I think even now, one thing that I find so beautiful is just being able to see, I mean, there's so many people whose eyes and whose faces are just etched into my mind simply because everybody's painting them, people are drawing them, people are taking these very powerful pictures, there's videos and commercials and all of these things that are just being able, and one of the pros of technology, just being able to be spread lightning fast across the world. It's super powerful. So I think art just in so many ways has the ability to travel in ways that maybe talking to people in your community and different things like that, just it doesn't move the same, because me talking as much as I did in Augusta, Georgia, and talking to people in Augusta, Georgia, I didn't learn much. So I think it just makes it, like I said, it's so much easier to spread and to receive too, because I mean, I think everybody in some way, shape, or form, can connect to different types of art. So I just think it's very, very easily spread.
Thank you, Bree. Jaquela, how has art generated political and social change from your perspective?
I would say, so I really wish I could remember exactly what the lesson was in this particular class, but I also can't remember, because after you get your degree, do you actually remember specifics? We had a conversation about the very thin line between social activism and being social about activism, which are two very different things. I like to use the black box example in this scenario. A lot of people who really ride the thin line of, no, Black Lives Matter, but I'm not going to say it out loud, or a lot of influencers, specifically Caucasian influencers, that don't want to really agitate their audience with pushing Black Lives Matter, but at the same time still want to keep a little bit of their Black audience. They posted this black box for Blackout Day. Never said anything before that, never said anything after that. So that's part of the very, very thin line of, I'm being social about these issues, and I'm using these issues to be social. So for me, I think that photography in itself, right, like you said, have been here for decades. And luckily, and I really hate to say it like this, but luckily, because we have a form of video, we are able to see the brutal events that happen to our people on a day-to-day basis. Without this medium, without social media, without news outlets, appropriate news outlets, there's so many cases, unfortunate cases, where people weren't lucky enough to have their situation videoed, right? So for me, I think that it just sparked outrage. It's kind of one of those things that's like out of sight, out of mind type of things. Like, oh, I'm sure it probably happened somewhere, but I don't see it, so it doesn't, emotionally touch me. It doesn't physically or mentally affect me. Versus like being very, very blunt and seeing the brutal acts that happen toward our men and women on a daily basis. So I think that as soon as video started becoming like a big thing, that's when the outpour and the outcry really started to heighten, right? We're not oblivious. We know that it's happened for centuries, but at the same time, it's like you don't see it, right? So I think that that is a very, very pivotal point in the time that we're in, because it shows two things. It shows the brutality, but it also shows the lack of care and empathy of the people that are being recorded. A lot of people are like, I don't care, record me. A lot of officers do not care because they know that they're not going to be held responsible with or without a recording. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword type of thing. But I personally think that it's just, for my generation at least, has caused us to be more passionate, um, more knowledgeable, and absolutely just ready to stand for more. And I think that that's because of now we have exposure to it. Like Bria said, for a lot of you who don't, well, none of you know because you don't know me. I'm from Ringgold, Georgia, which is predominantly white. It sits on the line of Georgia and Tennessee. It's the last city in Georgia before Chattanooga. So before I moved here, I had never even seen a homeless person before. I had no idea people slept outside. I had no idea that people eat out of trash cans and that's their main source of nutrients. Like, I never had any type of exposure to any of those things. I moved to Atlanta. Well, I moved to Douglasville, and I started seeing a little bit when I started driving and things like that. But when I came to Georgia State, that's when like everything just went to the very next level. So people can only fight for, advocate for, understand what they're exposed to. So luckily for us, imagery, as far as photography and videography, allows us to reach the masses in such a short period of time, and allows us to just say, hey, this is what's going on in New York. We're passing a bill in New York because of this, this, and this, but this is also happening the complete opposite side of the world in California. So we're sharing the same issues and we're sharing the same fight across the nation and maybe not even realizing it. So this is what this medium has allowed us to do now, is connect the dots and be united one front to be able to move forward and figure out how we want to navigate through this space together as a people.
Thank you, Jaquila. Dr. Bonnet Bailey.
Sure. This is what I do. This is what I research. So, how art has generated social and political change. So, in a number of ways. And I want to first comment on what Ms. Sharpley stated about using photography. So, when you think about people like Gordon Parks and using photography to actually capture the civil rights movement, but it was the advent of television that actually got more people involved in the civil rights movement, that actually changed the tide for the civil rights movement, because we could see ways in which art has generated social and political change, using the media to show what was going on, to show Bloody Sunday, to show John Lewis being beaten on that Edmund Pettus Bridge. So those are some ways, but we can go even further back. As far as generating change, we can think about ways in which art was utilized during slavery. So we can think about songs like Follow the Drinking Gourd were coded messages that were saying follow the North Star. And so this was a way to actually physically impact change. They were other songs like Go Down Moses, for example, was alerting enslaved people that Harriet Tubman was near, so to get ready because she was coming there to save you. And so these were coded ways in which we could utilize art form in order to impact change and in order to participate. We look at the Harlem Renaissance movement and the impact that it had, not only on for African Americans, but also letting the world know that we produce literature, that we produce poetry, the type of poetry and literature that we produce, that we create music. And it became so popular that it was often co-opted by those outside of our communities. And they saw that the use of it and the impact that it had as far as celebrating change, even the art during that time, focusing on Black people as subjects instead of objects, putting them in the forefront instead of in the periphery, was a idea of political and social change, because it allowed them to have the ability to be seen. And we see this currently in our days. We can think about Shonda Rhimes and the change she has brought to television by having these Black women star as the lead actresses on her shows. The things she has done, Ava DuVernay, in the creation of documentaries, which are art, and the way that they have used that to inform individuals. Or even if you look at some of her shows like Queen Sugar, I don't know if any of you watching it, but there is a lot of political information within those shows, and talking about the prison industrial complex, police brutality, all these things are discussed, that people who may not read the newspapers can utilize art to get their information from other sources. But specifics. So if I talk about specifics, we can look at hip hop. So Jay-Z and the Hip Hop Summit Action Network, which was founded by Russell Simmons, actually led protests and marches that had parts of the Rockefeller drug laws changed in New York. And so we can see ways in which artists have been involved. And I say Jay-Z and Russell Simmons, but there's a number of other artists like M1 from Dead Prez and another of other artists in New York who was involved in that. And today we're seeing artists being involved in protests as well, and they're leading change. And this is impactful because sometimes younger people only look at these artists. And so to see what they do impacts younger people to be involved or to know more about the issues. When the Gina 6 situation happened, it was Mos Def who organized a rally to organize people to go down to Louisiana to protest Gina 6. So we're seeing them use their platforms and use their artist platforms. When Trayvon Martin was killed, for example, Plies created a song dedicated to Trayvon Martin and donated the money to his family, which allowed them to pursue their civil rights case. So this is, again, looking at the ways in which hip hop can impact political and social change. Oh, and currently, of course, the hot person now, I think, is Lil Baby. Both Lil Baby and Da Baby had some stuff talking about Black Lives Matter, but I think it's Lil Baby who specifically wrote a song. I think Da Baby, all these babies, I might be getting them confused, but I think Da Baby had the Rockstar remix is what he did, and Lil Baby wrote an actual song about Black Lives Matter. So we see in them utilizing their platforms and their voice to talk about issues. And we have other people like 21 Savage, who's been fighting against immigration, who's utilized his music and his money, right? So we didn't really discuss the aspects of philanthropy as a form of activism, of ways in which you can use your money to support those individuals when you cannot participate directly. And that's another way in which I participate and others participate. But we also didn't talk about donating. And so we see people donating. I donate monthly to women's shelters. And then even individuals who are donating to those protesters. There were a number of students I had that were actually going and taking bottles of water and things downtown when individuals were protesting here in Atlanta. So in sum, there are a lot of ways in which art has generated social and political change. And I can definitely go through a number of other concrete ways in which art has generated social and political change, primarily through informing others of issues that they may not otherwise know.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bonnet Bailey, for that wealth of knowledge. Oliver, your perspective on this particular question.
So I gotta follow up the teacher who actually be teaching this stuff. No, I mean, aside from everything that was already mentioned, I mean, the way I see it in a general sense is like art is a language, right? And it's such a magical language because it transcends every social barrier that's out there, right? When I was in Morocco, I went to Morocco as a graduation gift to myself. And most of the people there obviously a lot of people there didn't speak English, but I met this guy who was from France, and I met him on the train to Casablanca. And he was telling me, he was trying to speak English his very, very best. And I was like, how'd you get to know this? Are you taking a class or something like that to know this level of English? He said, no, I got it from watching television. Like I watch Martin, I watch this, I watch that. And I'm like, okay, so it's now a vehicle for education for a lot of people internationally. And if it could do that on the most basic level of just like learning how to say little words, I'm sure it's doing that with messages as well. Internationally, you've seen like a lot of countries support Black Lives Matter. They see what's going on, they hear what's going on. specifically somebody mentioned it. I believe it was Jaquela. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, but you talked about people talking clear and straightforward with their messages and stuff. And I think that as artists, you have a responsibility to just pick a side and stand on that side, right? Like when you have a platform and you're considered an artist, whether you're an actor, like I want to use Terry Crews for an example, like, bruh, like you have a platform and you have an art form. You have people looking up. People looking at you, and it's not that what you're saying is incorrect. It's what you're saying is more confusing than it is progressive. You feel me? Like, yes, ideally we should all live in this utopic society where everybody loves each other, but we're not yet there yet, right? You just can't you can't walk in the middle of a revolution and start giving out hugs. You just can't do that. That's just not where we're at right now. That defeats the purpose. So I think that we have a responsibility to be clear and straightforward to what we do, and don't use your platform to confuse or mislead or try to appease white people at this time. You feel me? Say what you mean what you say. And I think if you do it through art, you have an opportunity to start the ripple effect and get your message out to multiple people, domestically and internationally, you know. And yeah, I think you have that responsibility as an artist. Let me take that back. You don't necessarily have that responsibility as an artist. I do not believe that. I believe not every artist has to be like a freedom fighter. But I do believe if that's your values, if that's where your values align, then you should abide by those responsibilities.
All right, Miss Dub, your turn.
So what a wonderful wealth of conversation. I'm just like taking it all in because for me, I have always felt that art was activism. I never really saw it as being separate, whether it be political activism or just telling the story of one's life, someone's lived experience. I even feel like that's art activism by allowing the world to see through your lens of whatever that platform may be. For me, I named my store, my business, Black Monarchy. I mean, you can't get more political than that. I remember when we first opened, I even had someone came in the store and was just like, if I had a white monarchy, they would burn the building down. And I was just like, you do. It's called America. Like, I think Black people have been fighting for space, and for agency and for space, to be valued, to build our own tables for so long. And a space like Black Monarchy does that. And the reason why I chose the name, because Black is Blackness is the creative of all things, right? So whether it's biblical, you believe, spiritually, scientifically, geographically, the first man was created and made in Africa. So from all things began with Africa, and then we separate into different diasporas amongst the globe. So for us, Black is the monarchy. If you mix all races, if you just mix all crayons and colors and whatever, you are going to come up with Black. And I think it's unfortunate that that's what terrifies America, is the fact that one day Black people, brown and Black people specifically, will actually realize that they have always been the monarchy, and it will shift power. It will shift a lot of the systemic things that are happening, the intersectionalities of race, class, and gender. Things will become completely shifted. And I feel like art is our way of expressing those things when we were not able to own our own stories, create our own narratives. Art is the way that we transcended all those conversations, because we can kind of agree on art being beautiful and special. And I think people are more willing to have hard conversations around things that we can agree on, which is really the beauty of what art is. Perfect example is head wraps. So I'm known for wearing head wraps. We're adjusting our crowns over here. And a lot of people had no idea where head wraps originated from and why women wear it, and why it's sort of part of pop culture, really transcending all racial lines and barriers at this point. But during the Reconstruction period, well, let's go back. So in Africa, even today, actually globally, people cover their heads in a form of reverence. Some people do it for religious purposes. Some people do it because it helps them carry the large containers and banisters on their heads as they bring food, water, miles and miles to their villages, their tribes, their families. And so this was a part of our heritage. Obviously, things were stripped from us when we, do the transatlantic slave trade, came here, things like that, blah, blah, blah. So we were given rags.
to put on our heads. So during the Reconstruction period, when people were actually kind of feeling themselves, getting a little bit more freedom, we're still fighting for freedom, but as those things were happening, darker skinned women specifically were told to put wraps on their heads. And even those that were mixed race, so those who were products of like slave rape from the master, things like that, they had to cover their heads because one, obviously there was a beauty there that maybe we didn't even know about, but they saw. But two, it was to separate and make people feel inferior to those who were white or still had power. You had women that passed because of their skin color. It was high, really light. So they were forced to put rags on their heads to separate them so people know who was in the lead, who was in charge, kind of a hierarchical system. And so because Black is art and Black is great, we started creating these beautiful head wraps and we tied them as high as we could. We adorned them with jewels, with jewelry. And then that became a problem. How dare they take rags and make it into something that like was very reminiscent of riches. And so even then, I feel like we've always used art in a way to express ourselves, to be more than what our circumstances were. Langston Hughes' poetry was birthed from that. Fashion, everyone's wearing a statement shirt of something because some people are not able to vocalize. Some people are still forming their language surrounding societal pressure, surrounding this new awakening and this new consciousness of what it means to be Black in America. So people are still navigating through the language on what to use, how to speak. And so you have fashion where it's like shirts are being made. I mean, statement shirts are probably like the #1 sellers right now in this particular movement because people want to feel a part. So for me as a fashion activist, I think fashion has been a subtle way for us to have really hard and important conversations where people can argue about whatever, but they're not going to really argue about what you're wearing because it's a statement. And usually it's held true to how you feel. So it's like you get to walk around freely with what's on your body and express yourself that way. I think everyone should realign and rejoin themselves with African fabrics, not because it's trendy, but because it was ours and we were permission was given to us on when and how we can wear these things. And I think we should just re-own those fabrics and re-own fashion and do what we know to do, which is to really adorn ourselves for freedom.
Thank you, Felicia. Dr. Bonnet Bailey wanted to add something.
Yes, I want to follow up with Ms. Dub. She's right that everything that we do, what we wear, our outward appearance is all about activism as well. So it can be something as simple for me. I mean, my locks have meaning, but my locks can be seen as a symbol of political resistance, right? And so that is a form of activism. Her head wrap is an example of activism. Hairstyles. So I mentioned before that we had songs that talked about slavery, but they were actually maps braided into women's hair during slavery that actually pointed to different things. So this idea of cornrows and braids and hairstyles that we know within our community is also forms of activism as well. And even, you know, we know wearing the afro was a big, huge political symbol at the time to get rid of the conch and to put the afro and to wear your afro. But following up with that was styles and fashion. Hip hop clothing, hip hop styles, hip hop fashion is a huge aspect of resistance, right? Because it was resisting all the norms. I'm gonna wear my pants saggy. I'm going to wear my clothes backwards. Back in my day with crisscross, I'm going to wear cross colors. All of these were examples of activism and stating that you are a part of the hip hop generation, that you lived through hip hop. But also hip hop in itself is an act of resistance. If we look at all the elements of hip hop, graffiti art, breakdancing, DJing, how hip hop started, it's all an act of resistance. It's all ways in which we use art to resist mainstream society, to resist Eurocentricity, to resist hegemony. But one of the things I really just wanted to add was that Black Lives Matter mural, the first one that was painted on the roads leading to the White House. Now that was using art as a strong symbol of resistance. And the mayor stated there that this is something that Trump can wake up every morning and see painted down the street facing the White House, that Black Lives Matter. And since then, we've seen other cities adopt it, even New York putting one in front of Trump Towers, putting the Black Lives Matter mural in front of Trump Towers and drawing it on the street there. So we're looking at the ways in which art is utilized in conjunction with protesting, in conjunction with electoral politics, to further spread this message. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Awesome, no problem. So I did not expect that question to be so jam-packed. We have about 13 minutes left. That was great things that you all stated, perspectives. You actually kind of answered maybe one or two of the questions that I had coming up next. But this one is going to be very brief. And we kind of sort of touched on it a little bit with some of your examples, Dr. Bonnet Bailey. But film and television can be forms of art that can influence the way societies view the community, identity group, or social issues. So writer, director, and producer Spike Lee has addressed many social issues through his film throughout the decades. What are some influential films, either past or present, that you believe have helped shift the climate of cultural understanding? And what about these films made them game changers? And we will start with Jaquela.
This is so hard for me because I'm one of those people who are like still not really, I guess, have adapted to seeing like brutal films. I don't like slave movies. I don't like 12 Years a Slave. Like I really don't like movies like that. While I think they're important, they're very hard for me to watch. So I thought about this and I was like, first thing that pops in my head means that it's something. And the very first thing that popped in my head was Hidden Figures. That popped in my head because I have a number of little mixed cousins, girls and boys. And particularly the little girls, I think looked at things differently. And while they're young and they didn't really understand, just the fact that they asked for black dolls was like super exciting for me. I don't think it's like they, like they're kids. So it's not like they didn't like want one before. I guess they just, you see the dolls that you see and that's what you play with. And speaking of dolls, Hidden Figures made Barbie come out with a completely different line of dolls that are more inclusive of everyone. And ever since then, I've seen dolls with like bionic legs and arms and wheelchairs, scientists, like all types of things. And so for me, identifying as a Black woman, Hidden Figures was like, it's what we needed. It's what we needed for us. I'm not gonna act like there's not positive influences in the media for us, but overall, like Hidden Figures was like, we're brilliant, we're resilient, we are the force of change versus we are loud, we are baby mamas, we are whatever else is in a normal typical film. For me, Hidden Figures made me even more proud to be a Black woman. Like I kind of walked around with a chip on my shoulder, like, we was at NASA. Where was you at? Oh, okay. Like that's how I started to feel. So I would say Hidden Figures was that defining and turning point for me, and for a lot of young people.
Thank you, Jaquela. Bree.
So yeah, on the wave of like film and watching things, I don't think I engage as much with film to have a whole lot of insight. But I will say two documentaries, like specifically, that really changed my outlook around a lot of things were 13th and The Grass is Greener. And I think both of those documentaries did a really good job of taking just matter of fact, everyday things that have been going on for a really long time and bringing a lot of the underlying political and legal ties into it to the forefront. So for 13th, of course, I hear about mostly Black men being in these jails. But with this documentary, I see why. And I see how there's so many loopholes in our legal system that make it okay. And I mean, just a wealth of knowledge. And The Grass is Greener, that's a documentary. It's actually based around cannabis activism and how exactly Black people became barred from $1 billion industry now. And, just how matter of fact and very racist it was to try to separate, this plant and from these people simply because they don't look like us. And the documentary also, The Grass is Greener, had a lot of, people who I wouldn't say I normally hear hear much of them speaking up. And I know the host of it, or the guy who came up with it, I think his name is, I'm gonna embarrass myself, Fab Five Freddy, I believe. I know, yes, Dr. Bonnet Bailey, you can help me out. But yes, he, was all of these, the center of all this hip hop and everything like that. And, very much so, an indulger. And just seeing the legal, like, standpoints behind why this drug became what it became, simply because of the Black and brown people who brought it here, the Black people in New Orleans, and the Hispanic people coming from Mexico. Like, I mean, it just opened my eyes. I think both of those documentaries really, really changed my outlook too, just on how deep rooted racism in this country is, and just how much work has to be done, even, like I said, within our government to change it. So I really think those two films, that's to mind first, with just really changing my mindset around what activism has to look like, what type of activism we have to do. Because I promise you, I ain't know nothing and hadn't heard anything about cannabis activism until that documentary, and realized just how important it is, even whether you use it or not, whether you indulge or not. I think both of those things are really important.
So we have about 6 minutes. So if we could keep our answers panelists down to about 30 seconds. So I want to go Felicia, Oliver, and then Dr. Bonnet Bailey.
Immediately, I think of Ava's When They See Us. I grew up watching slave movies. My mom was a radical. I grew up in a Black Panther household. I was raised by a Nation of Islam FOI. So my background and upbringing makes sense as to why I do what I do, which is, it's a special place. It's not for everyone. All of my siblings are not like this. But I grew up watching Roots. I grew up watching Serafina. And so for me, the one movie that really brought everything full circle for me was When They See Us. I think that changed the landscape of America. For those who wanted to ignore it, they could no longer ignore it, because you have live bodies that can speak directly to this experience. So you can't argue with the lived experience. Like, this actually happened. And not only did it happen, it was pushed by our current president. It was lobbied by, like, a whole system that just wanted to devour these children. So for me, that one was the most impactful movie thus far. And for those who watch, just a tidbit, it is okay not to watch these movies if they trigger you. It is so very important to know that Black people exist in a constant state of PTSD because of the trauma that we endure by watching killings, watching things like that. So when you watch these movies, definitely protect your space, protect your peace. Know that these should be educational purposes. But if you feel like it's too strong and you take it on, take a break, and know that that's okay to do that as well. You have to protect your mental health.
Oliver.
So really quickly, I don't want to, like, my favorite movie of all time is Great Debaters with Denzel Washington. And we talk about, like, seeing Black educated men and women in this collegiate space, and going against racism through academics and through debates. So that was it for me. However, I want to use this time to talk about literature, like a book. Ta-Nehisi Coates' The Water Dancer. I think that book, for me, after reading it, it humanized the Black experience in America, which has sometimes can be seen as like, we got here, then slavery, and then that's when our history started, right? And I think that's become like the wide view of where it started. But that book, even though it's a fiction book, it humanizes that experience, even the slave experience, and to the point where it's just like, no, these were real people with real stories and experience things that took place over a course of several years, generations and generations, and you see like the culture that was built in it. And so I think that one of the things that it accomplishes for me, it was just like, when you humanize the Black experience, you now see yourself, and I see my brother as a human, you feel me? Which growing up in Flatbush, it wasn't like that. It was just like, look at that nigga right there, or what's good, my nigga? It was very like low level energy that we vibrated on, But now that they've become humanized and I'm a human, it's like, that's what that book did for me. I could go on for longer than 30 seconds, but I'll respect the time.
Thank you. And Dr. Bonnet Bailey.
Roots was definitely a game changer. Sometimes in April is a movie about Rwanda genocide. It's definitely a game changer. I am a historian, so I watch all kind of documentaries all the time. And I do agree, take a break. But I would think for me right now, as we're having this question, one of the a documentary that actually gave me the most chills was Beyonce's Coachella concert. Because of all the blackness that was in that for the audience that it was for. I mean, it was so black from the singing the national anthem to having the black bands to going into stepping. All of the aspects of black culture was presented in that. So that's what I'll leave with Beyonce.
See, now I'm gonna have to go watch it again. Ah! All right. So our last question: what advice would you give to young artists who want to incorporate social justice in their form of art? So we'll start with Bree, and we'll go in that first sequential order that we had. So what advice would you give to young artists who want to incorporate social justice in their form of art?
I personally believe that where we live, being black and just being in and of itself is activism. To be here and to be black, you are an activist. Now, whether your content aligns with that or not, that's up to you. But I think that if you decide that, being a part of the movement in some intentional way is what you want to do, then you just have to do it, whatever space. So whether it be, painting, drawing, writing, whatever you think that you want to do, be black and do it. And that makes you an activist because, I mean, me even holding the paintbrush wasn't allowed a few years ago. So that would be my advice. Just do it.
Jaquela.
That's literally exactly what I was gonna say. Just do it. Like, just do it. But be mindful and just try to have a little bit of empathy. That's all. We need to see raw images. We need to see the real. We need photography in way of documentary. But what we don't need is continuous traumatizing images of brutality. Um, while that may be educational for us, that's still someone's child. That's still someone's mother, brother, sister. That's still someone's family. So just try to be respectful, but just do it because we need it. And that's what sparked all the change that we have had now. So just do it.
Dr. Bonnet Bailey.
I would say be authentic. And by that, I mean be authentic in yourself, be authentic in who you are. Let your light shine through. Don't try to assimilate or get indoctrinated into what people or society want you to believe is who you are. So learn yourself, know thyself, and be authentic to that person that you are. And you will resist. Just being authentic is resisting conformity, right? And so that is activism in and of itself. So just be authentic.
Oliver.
Like to echo that, be authentic, be yourself. Also understand that black is not monolithic. There's not one way to be black. Be yourself and you'll be black and you'll be an activist in your own way. And the second thing I want to say is own your art. Stop going to these white companies and trying to sell yourself into these broader ranges because they have more of a reach to the audience or whatever like that. Own your shit. Like I really believe in ownership and black ownership and sustaining yourself. Nipsey talked about it in his music. You feel me? Jay-Z talked about it. Set your price and live your life. And I live by that. So, yeah.
Thank you. And to close us out, last but not least, Miss Felicia Dove.
I want to just piggyback and echo everything everyone said. I mean, quite incredibly, just be true to what you're doing. Don't kind of jump on waves because those who jump on waves usually die down like waves do. So be an innovator. Be true to exactly what's in you, the things that you want to say, get it out. Art is the one free expression that we all have, and that has really, I think, in this very moment, has pushed and propelled this conversation forward. I think we're living in a time right now where you can almost manifest almost anything and it'll come right before you. We're living in the most, I think, woke, racially, I don't know how to say it, like unrested climate that I think any of us have ever done in our lifetime. So right now, like, figure out what is it that makes you come alive, that can help push you, your art, and your platform to your people. Be true to that. Don't make it gimmicky. Like, literally let whatever's in your body just pour out, and then that's your activism.
Awesome. So I'm going to close out. Ms. Dove, if you still want to put those websites or links in our chat box for our participants, that would be lovely.
I was trying. I don't know how to do it. I'm new to WebEx.
I
don't know how to do it.
It's okay. How about this? If you send them to me via email, I can also send it out to the people who attended. That'll work that way as well.
Perfect.
Yes, no problem. So thank you all for attending our last Talk Tuesday of the semester, well, of the summer rather. And so we look forward to seeing you all in the fall. Thanks again to our wonderful panelists. I say this each and every time we do this. This has been my favorite conversation, but this build-up, this has been a wonderful conversation. So many different perspectives, so much knowledge dropped. And I appreciate all of you. So without further ado, you all take care. Thank you so much for joining, and have a great rest of your Tuesday.
Thank you.